I've observed is this. Every couple decades, it seems, there's this thing that comes on us in America and to some degree in Europe. Some have called it apocalyptic fever, where, for whatever reasons, Christians and sometimes others get obsessed with the end of the world. Whenever that happens, the book of Revelation takes center stage and people start gazing into the crystal ball to figure out the details of this thing. And there are people who are doing that all the time. They make a living doing it, but once in a while it grips the culture every couple of decades. I came to Christ in one of those periods. It was the mid-'70s, 1974. And Hal Lindsay had just come out with his late great Planet Earth. That was like a bestseller. And everyone was reading it. And they were coming out with these scary movies like Thief in the Night. And Keith Green's scary song, Life Was Filled with Guns and War, and everyone got trampled on the floor. I wish we'd all been ready. And people were getting scared into the kingdom. And the Antichrist is coming. You better know Jesus or you're going to get it. And we gazed in that crystal ball a lot. In fact, I'd say most of the time reading the Bible, it was the book of Revelation. And we had it figured out. And we knew. We knew that Henry Kissinger was the Antichrist. We could prove it. And we knew, that the 10-headed beast of the book of Revelation is the 10 heads of the European Union in the mid-'70s. And we knew that they had a computer that was called the beast, and it was going to be part of the whole one world government. And the barcodes that were just now coming out, that was all part of the one world government to take over the Antichrist. We just knew it. We knew that this was going to wrap up in a year or two at most, and we're going to be raptured. And that's the belief that Christians will be suctioned up into the sky, and then the world will go to hell in a handbasket, but we won't be around, so it doesn't bother us. And we would witness to people by saying, are you rapture ready? Are you rapture ready? You want to be taken up because, man, once we're gone, it's going to be bad. We found prophecies throughout the book of Revelation about helicopters and nuclear bombs and ray guns and Russia, Gog and Magog and China and all that. We had it down. Well, it seems to me that we're in one of those kind of periods now. It's not just Christians either. In the last 2 years, there's been over a dozen movies produced by Hollywood about the end of the world, apocalyptic movies. It's really capturing people. Apocalyptic fever is in the air. And a lot of folks are gazing into the crystal ball. That Left Behind series, that book series, was on the New York Times bestseller list, sold millions and millions of copies. How come none of my books sell like that? But it's all based on this crystal ball model of Revelation. And man, it just sells. They made a movie out of it. I didn't see it, but it's called Left Behind, and I'm told it wasn't the greatest movie in the world. But I'm also told that I've read that Hollywood is coming out with another version of a remake of it. And it's going to star Nicolas Cage. Left Behind with Nicolas Cage. I'm really hoping they cast Al Pacino as the Antichrist, because he'd make a great Antichrist. He's got to get it. He just has Antichrist written all over him. It's in the air. It's just what people are talking about. I'm getting questions all over the place about prophecy and book of Revelation and conspiracy theories, which wrap into the whole end times things. It's exploding right now. On the internet, conspiracy theories are all over the place. The Illuminati's back. It's in vogue once again. And I get asked, do you think that Obama is going to head up, he's creating the one world government. That's one of the theories out there. He and the Clintons, they're creating one world government. Is he the Antichrist? And they're fitting it with the book of Revelation, this passage and that passage or whatever. Basically, whoever you hate, they're the evil ones running the world, and they'll be the Antichrist. And it's just going all over the place. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this series. One of the things that concern me the most is I'm finding in certain conservative Christian circles that this obsession with the crystal ball view of Revelation is affecting people's attitudes. Where it seems to me that they like the Jesus of Revelation as they read it, this sword-wielding warrior, better than the Jesus of the Gospels, and they're imitating that, their reading of that Jesus in Revelation more than Jesus of the Gospel. And there's this kind of gloating that's going on about how their enemies are going to get it when Jesus comes back. He's coming back and he's ticked off. Have you seen that bumper sticker? Jesus is coming back and man, is he pissed? Well, that's the kind of thing. Our enemies are going to get it. They're going to be thrown in the lake of fire. They're going to burn, and the beast is going to devour them. Oh, it'll be great. And we'll be watching from heaven going, yay, come on, do it. It's like, you guys, what about... That doesn't reflect the attitude of Jesus that we find in the New Testament. So this series is something that's very, very needed, I think. And the hope here is that it will help us read Revelation the way it was intended, to be free of the kind of crystal ball gazing thing, to be free of that obsessiveness with regard to the future, and hopefully to feel the beautiful impact of this profound book. What I've noticed is that people tend to burn out on that apocalyptic fever. I did. And I, for about 15 years, didn't want anything to do with the book of Revelation. I realized how subjective our interpretations were and how it's just kind of guesswork. It struck me as very irrelevant. And I wondered why God would inspire a book that will only be really clearly understandable in the last several years of history, and by then it's going to be too late. What was the point of doing that? So I pretty much stayed away from the book of Revelation. And then about 20 years ago, right around the time we started Woodland Hills, I kind of stumbled upon some scholarly literature that offered a perspective of Revelation that I had never known about. The book began to become alive to me, and it has increasingly so over the years. I began to understand why this book was written, what kind of book we're dealing with, the genre of it, and what its basic message is. And what happened to me was that this book, which on a literal reading seems so scary, if you understand the way that these scholars are saying it should be understood, the way it was intended, it becomes not scary at all, but a beautiful, promising book. And whereas on the surface, if you're reading it literally, it looks like it's about the future, I'm hoping we grasp that this book is really about the present. And while it looks terrifying on one level, and you look like you have a violent Jesus, if you're reading it literally, it's really a profoundly anti-violent book. And it offers a beautiful vision of God, and a beautiful vision of the kingdom, and a beautiful way of overcoming evil that applies to us right here and right now. And so our prayer is that this is what we get out of this whole series. That's why we're calling it Rescuing Revelation. For me, Revelation was rescued from just being a puzzling sort of irrelevant book to being a profound book because it was rescued from the crystal ball way of reading it. And so we're trying to rescue Revelation from the Hollywood way of treating it and to read it in a way that we think it was intended, in a way that really ministers to us in the here and the now. So what we'll do each week is we can't possibly preach through the whole book, obviously, in 5 weeks, but we'll take a major theme that's woven throughout the book, and we'll unpack the book that way. But what I want to do for the rest of this message is just read the first 4 verses of this book, because these first 4 verses say a whole lot about the kind of book that we're reading and the kind of mindset we should have as we approach it. And I once again lost my glasses, so I'm back to these silly-looking reading glasses that are all smudged up. I am terrible when it comes to hanging on to things. Don't they look ridiculous? All right, so here's what it says, first 4 verses. This is a revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants what must soon take place. He made it known by sending his angel to his servant John, who testifies to everything he saw. That is the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now pause for a moment here. Notice that everything everything John saw was the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. And that word "and" there in Greek is kai, and it can be translated, and I think should be translated even, not "and," but even. It's a conjunctive kai, which means he's saying the word of God, which is Jesus Christ, the testimony of Jesus Christ. So everything John saw was a testimony of Jesus Christ, and so this book is all about the testimony of Jesus Christ. Everything in this book is about the testimony of Jesus Christ. That's very different than having this book being a crystal ball about the future. This is about Jesus Christ here and now. Okay, let's go on. And he says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear it and take to heart what is written in it, because the time is near." This is John, the Apostle John, to the 7 churches in the province of Asia. All right. He says that this is the revelation from Jesus Christ. The word revelation in Greek is the word we get the word apocalypse from. Apocalypse. And the word apocalypse in Greek means to unveil, to disclose something, to reveal. Now, it shows you already how dominant this crystal ball mindset is by noticing that that's not what the word apocalyptic means to us anymore. The original meaning is unveiling, revelation. We use the word apocalyptic to be synonymous with disaster. End of the world. We say that was a disaster of apocalyptic proportions. It means it looked like the end of the world. But that's not at all what the original meaning of it is, and it just shows you how our view of things has changed. This is not a book about the disastrous end. It's a book that reveals Jesus Christ, which is what John says. That's what he saw. It was a testimony of Jesus Christ. This also identifies the genre of this book. Genre is the type of literature that you're dealing with. And it's very important to know the type of book you're reading, because that will influence the interpretation of it. You don't interpret all types of literature the same. Now, the apocalyptic genre was a genre that existed from about 200 BC to about 200 AD. During that period, it was very popular. And one of the things that makes it noteworthy is that it was characterized by using dramatic, sometimes even surrealistic symbols to denote historical events and spiritual realities. It was a kind of literature that intended, through its graphic images, to make an impact on people, to motivate them to live in a certain way. It's like surrealistic poetry. It's very graphic. And there's other reasons why they did that. Some have theorized that part of this, the literature is almost always subversive to the established powers. In the book of Revelation, we'll see, is very much so. It's undermining Rome. And some have supposed that maybe one of the reasons why they spoke with these symbols is that the audiences, the Christian Jewish audiences, understood these symbols, but the Romans couldn't. And so it was a way of communicating their message in a way that if this letter was confiscated by the authorities, they wouldn't be able to understand it and therefore couldn't persecute the people on that basis. But even apart from that, the images are graphic and powerful, intended to make a punch to change you, to transform you. Vern Eller wrote a book, the best popular book I know on the book of Revelation. It's called The Most Revealing Book in the Bible, Vern Eller. If there's one book I'd recommend on Revelation, it'd be that one. And he compares the book of Revelation to Picasso's famous painting, Guernica. Now, Guernica was a town that was bombed by the Nazis, just decimated by the Nazis in 1942. And this is the painting. Picasso is making a statement about a historical event. Like apocalyptic literature, this is a historical painting. It's communicating a historical event, but not in a literal way. You'll entirely miss the point of the painting if you say, the guy down there on the ground, what's his name? Is he related to the other guy over there? How old do you think he is? And then, did people in Guernica really look like this? Man, they must have lived close to a nuclear plant or something, because they seem very deformed. Or is this the result of the bomb, and that they're all dismembered like this? And, oh, that poor horse, what's his name? We miss the point if we start trying to extract literal information out of this. To get the point of this painting, and to get the point of apocalyptic literature, you have to stop analyzing in a literal way and just let it impact you. Just let the images work together to create something in your heart. And when you do that, you'll find that this painting, at least to a lot of people, communicates something that a literal snapshot ever could. It captures the horror of this event, the macabre dimension of this event, maybe even the diabolical dimension of this event, the pain of this event, the evil of it. As sometimes people, and today, folks tend to be, we're in love with literalness more than, I think, any culture prior to us. We just love the literal. And people ask, well, why do you have to be so opaque? And why don't you just say it straight? Tell us it in a literal way. Picasso, why do you have to be so fancy? And the answer is that you can say things in a non-literal way that are more profound than what you could say in a literal way. A snapshot could give you an actual scene of what the town looked like after the bombing. And if that's what you're looking for, fine, a snapshot will do. But a snapshot isn't going to capture the evil of it. And so he is here using this expressionistic kind of style, bringing out a dimension that would otherwise escape our eye. And so it is with apocalyptic literature. It's not meant to be analyzed in a literal way, and if you approach it with a literal mindset, you're going to miss the point of the whole thing. It's intended to be something that impacts our heart, and that thereby changes us and motivates us to move in a different direction. And to do that, we've just got to let it speak to us in these dramatic symbols. It's got to be felt. That's why we find John saying this. He says, "Blessed is the one who reads aloud the words of this testimony, and blessed are those who hear." Notice this. John is assuming that this letter will be heard for the most part. In the ancient world, most people couldn't read, and so this is how you read a book. Someone would read it to you. And we know that the early churches would get together. This is what we need to envision as we're reading this book. They would get together in a house church, roughly 20 to 30 people. One person would read it aloud in one sitting, and the others would hear. And so you get a very different impression of the book of Revelation if you're hearing it in one setting. You're not stopping. It's all one piece. You get a very different impression if you're doing it that way than if you are microanalyzing it, picking apart verse by verse with your eye towards current events. John intends us to be hearing it the first way, not using it the second way. It's a little bit like a musical piece, an orchestral piece. You hear it, and you hear it as a whole, and it's the whole that impacts you. The relationship between the parts, all together, it has an impact on us. But if you stop the musical piece every 2 seconds to analyze each note, well, you're not going to feel the impact of the whole. You're dissecting it rather than experiencing it. And so it is with the book of Revelation. It's meant to be experienced, not to be dissected. Now, we sometimes have to, in fact, we frequently will have to stop and analyze the images he uses. Because he's using images that are going to be familiar to the people at the time. They'll know what it means, but we don't. Things are obvious to them that aren't obvious to us. And so we'll need to stop and assess it. But we're doing this, we're assessing these symbols not by correlating them to our time, but by correlating them to their time. Because the question is, how would they have understood it? And we'll find that the symbols begin to take on a profound meaning, and they stop being guesswork when you locate them in their time rather than trying to locate them in our current time. If we're assessing these symbols with our view on the newspaper or the news and trying to relate it like that, we're entirely missing the point of what John is getting at. And that relates to this final point. He says he's writing to the 7 churches in the province of Asia Minor. That's the initial audience that John's writing to. These were churches that John was an overseer of. And so he is thinking of them as he's writing this. These are actual people and actual churches in an actual location. He's not writing to the 21st century. He's writing to these actual people. And so our job is to try to get into their mindset to understand the book the way they would have understood it. To assess the symbols the way they would have assessed it. See, if Revelation was in fact an inspired cryptogram that 21st century people are to decode, then it couldn't have possibly meant anything to the people in the first century. In fact, as I just said a little bit ago, it wouldn't mean much of anything to anyone up until the last several years of world history when it's too late. But John is communicating things that he intends his audience to understand. And it's true of every book of the Bible that the primary meaning is going to be the meaning that it had to the original audience. It amazes me how people who understand that and they apply it to every other book of the Bible, when they come to the book of Revelation, all of a sudden they forget that. And they're always just looking at what does it mean to us in light of current events. No, the book applies to us. As all books of the Bible, they apply to us and they apply to people throughout all time. But before we can apply them rightly, we have to know what it means. You can't apply it before you know what it means. And to know what it means, we've got to get inside of their heads and go back to the first century. And so he's speaking about events that are happening in the first century. This is why he says, you may have noticed this, at the beginning it says that these are events that are soon going to take place. And then verse 3, the time is near. And then he ends the book by saying that the Lord sent his angel to show his servants the things that must soon take place. Throughout this book, we find an emphasis on doing things quickly because the time is on us. Now, we need to understand soon and near the way they would have understood soon and near. And when they hear the word soon and near and act quickly, they're not thinking, 2,000 years from now. No, they're thinking it's right on us here. If they would have thought that this is about what's going to happen 2,000 or 2,500 years from now, then they wouldn't have been motivated to act quickly. The reason they're motivated to act quickly is because they're told that these things are right here now. This is going to happen tomorrow. So the events that we need to be worried about to understand this book aren't events in our time, whether it's Obama or the European Union or whatever. No, we need to be looking at what events were happening in the first century and relate them to these symbols. And when we do that, we're going to see this book takes on a clarity and a meaning that it otherwise wouldn't have. And then we can apply it to our life. And it applies in some beautiful and very profound ways.